As compact crossovers continue to be the dominant family car of choice here in America, it's really forced a lot of the mainstream brands to step up their game. Now in this segment, Toyota's always been the king of sales with the RAV4. However, it's always kind of lived in the shadows of the Mazda CX-5, which is the enthusiast choice in the compact SUV segment. Now today I'm just outside of Seattle, Washington with the rest of the members of the Automotive Video Association, where I've got the latest 2019 CX-5 Signature and the latest 2019 Toyota RAV4 Adventure. Now, I've always thought of the CX-5 to be the best in the segment, and in today's video, the big question I want answered, can the all-new RAV4 dethrone Mazda to claim that title? That's what we're here to find out. So when you look at the design of the new RAV4 and the CX-5, in the past you would always kind of choose the Mazda to be the style leader in the segment, but Toyota's really trying to change that with the all-new 5th generation RAV4. It takes a lot of styling cues from Toyota's truck lineup. In fact, it kind of looks like a mix-up between a 4Runner and a Tacoma at the front end. It's a much more aggressive, much more masculine look versus the previous generation. Now this particular one, being the Adventure Grade, does have a unique front fascia. Now all RAV4s will have standard LED headlights, where you'll have an LED daytime running light, LED low and high beams, an incandescent turn signal, and just halogen projector fog lights. Now, the Adventure Grade in this particular blue crushed metallic definitely looks pretty aggressive. It really stands out in the way that a Mazda SUV could used to stand out. Honestly, it reminds me a lot of the previous generation Mazda 3 hatchback, where they had that Smurf blue color. It was really surprising that Toyota decided to go with offering a bright color like this on the Adventure Grade of the RAV4. Now, that two-tone roof that you're seeing on this model is also a $500 option. It looks really good with the white roof, the black mirrors, and this bright blue exterior color. Now, in contrast, the Mazda's look also still is very elegant and very classy. It reminds you a lot of like a concept car with the signature 5-point grille. Mazda also makes LED headlights as standard. They're an LED low and high beam, and then they give you LED fog lights here at the lower fascia. This grille is definitely much larger and more in your face versus the Toyota. It's got this chrome strip that goes underneath the lights. Again, it's also equally handsome, especially when you have it in the Soul Red crystal color that Mazda offers as a $600 option. Personally, when it comes to the color, I think they're both good looking colors. It's just going to depend on your particular taste. Now, in terms of the wheel options, the Signature model does come with 19-inch wheels. They're wrapped in 225/55 series tires. They have a unique finish to them that is unique to this Signature trim versus if you guys go for like a Grand Touring model. Now, the CX-5 is definitely more of a hatchback when you look at the side profile of this vehicle. With only 7.5 inches of ground clearance, this has about an inch less ground clearance than the RAV4, and a wheelbase around 106 inches long. It's got an inch longer wheelbase than the RAV, but at 179 inches long, this is about an inch shorter than the RAV4. So again, much more crossover hatchback-like look versus with the RAV4, Toyota went with a much more aggressive look that looks more like an SUV. Now at the back, you have similar taillights that are skinny. They're kind of an LED combination. The turn signals are just an incandescent, but the reverse lights are an LED. Down here, you've got this lower cladding at the bottom, and then you also have dual outlet exhaust, which Toyota surprisingly gives you the same thing on the all-new RAV4. Now, looking at the cargo area, this is where the Mazda's weaknesses also come into play, because you do have less space than what you get in the RAV4. At 30.8 cubic feet of space, this is about 8 cubic feet less than what you get in the RAV4. And if you want to fold down those seats, Mazda only quotes this at around 59 cubic feet of space, which is again 10 cubic feet less than what you get in the RAV4. Now, the power tailgate that you're seeing is also standard on this model. The RAV4 also has a power liftgate as well. Now, looking at the design of the RAV4 in the back, you can see I think the Mazda is the better looking of the two. I wasn't really warmed up to the overall looks of the RAV4 when I first saw it. Now, I do like the Adventure Grade, how they painted this little bar here, where some trims will give you like a white or a black bar. You have an LED combination taillight again, where the turn signals are incandescent. Looks like the reverse lights are also incandescent, where Mazda gives you an LED. Toyota also gives you a little bit more black cladding here at the lower fascia with this silver paint. You can see the dual exhaust, like I said, it's got some nicely integrated parking sensors. But then when you open up the cargo area, of the RAV4, which, by the way, it has kind of a slow power rear liftgate. I wish Toyota would allow you to increase the speed of it. This has significantly more room than the Mazda. Toyota says this is around 37 cubic feet of space, which is good. If you fold down those seats, you get around 70 cubic feet of space. So not top of the class. The Subaru Forester or CR-V has a little bit more space, but you can see it's still very good for what it is and much more than what you get in the Mazda. Now, the rest of the side profile of the RAV4, you can see it has a very unique look to it. It stands out a lot more than the Mazda, especially when you option in that $500 to get the two-tone paint with this kind of black bar that separates the two. The Toyota also has 19-inch wheels that's unique to the adventure grade model with these black finishes. This is actually a fatter tire. It's a 235 width tire, so 10 millimeters fatter than what you get on the Mazda, which is kind of interesting considering that's supposed to be the sportier option. Toyota actually puts bigger wheels and tires, and you have about 8.6 inches of ground clearance on the Toyota. So this is the one that you're going to be more comfortable with taking off-road. So moving on to the interior of these two crossovers, I'm going to first start with the Toyota, which has an okay sounding door, not quite as tinny as the last Camry that I drove. Remember, this is riding on the TNGA platform as the Camry, but it makes a pretty decent sound when you shut it. I'm not sure if it's more solid sounding than the Mazda. Now, looking at the overall interior of the RAV, I'm not going to go too much in depth with this because I already did a full review on the RAV. If you're interested in checking that out, be sure to click on the link in the description below. But as you can see, this adventure grade model has some nice color options that make it stand out in the way that the exterior does. I love all the orange trim that's kind of splashed throughout this cabin. You have the orange right here, the orange here, you have the orange stitching that even carries over onto the doors. Now, Toyota really improved the overall interior quality of this vehicle. You can see the dash is a soft touch material. This is a faux stitching right here, but it's also soft touch on this upper portion. You have some silver painted plastic trim. You have the Entune 3.0 system here with Apple CarPlay and Amazon Alexa, but no Android Auto. And then all the soft touch materials are also carried over onto the actual doors. Now, the key fob, you can see here's the current key fob on the RAV4. It's their push button start with intelligent access key. I believe you need to get the XLE trim to get this feature, but once you put your foot on the brake, the vehicle will start right up for you. It has that typical Toyota 4-cylinder noise. Now, in terms of the rest of the interior, the steering wheel comes right from a Camry. You can see it's a tilt telescoping design, which is good. The seats are also an 8-way power seat, but no memory seat function on this particular trim. I believe the limited trim has the memory seat function. You kind of have to go up to the even higher luxury grade, although the Adventure is available with some pretty nice stuff. Now, overall, the rest of the dashboard, you can see I like the floating tablet style display in this vehicle. It's an 8-inch display. It's their latest Toyota Entune. It has embedded navigation that's part of a $1,700 option that my tester has. It also has a nice knob here for volume and for tuning. And overall, most people are going to get into this. They're going to be able to know how to use this. And I love the fact that Toyota has added Apple CarPlay, but still no Android Auto, at least not on this application just yet. You have dual zone climate control over here, which is nice. You have heated and cooled seats. Now, previously, Toyota never even offered cooled seats on the RAV, and I like how they offer it now on the Adventure grade as well, in addition to the limited model. Down here, you can see your controls for your drive mode selector. There's a normal, eco, and a sport, electronic parking brake, wireless phone charger there. And then when you put the vehicle into reverse, you can see it has a backup camera with trajectory and parking sensors. If you want a 360 camera, you have to go up to the limited grade models. Now, the cup holders you can see are pretty large. You can put a good amount of stuff over here. You have a nice padded armrest over here with really good amount of storage. There's 2 USB ports over there. And then the seats, I think they're very comfortable. It's Toyota's Softex leatherette material, like that they're heated and cooled. If you want real leather, you have to go up to the Adventure grade. Now above me, you can see I have just a standard size sunroof on this model. It's actually part of like an $800 option. Toyota does offer a pano sunroof that's like a $1,500 option if you guys look at the limited trim, which you can't even get a pano sunroof on the Mazda, so it's definitely a plus. But overall, the cabin is nice, but let me hop into the interior of the Mazda so we can compare the two. Now, hopping into the interior of the CX-5, you can tell the door sounds much more solid when it's shut, so bravo on Mazda for making a vehicle that sounds a little bit better when you shut the door. But overall, the interior of the Mazda kind of goes in a different direction versus the Toyota. It has some more classy luxury car ambiance. The two cars both have the stitching on the dashboard, but the Mazda's is a faux stitching here, but it looks a little bit more genuine. The wood in here is also really classy looking. It's definitely a fake wood, I want to say, although the signature trims tend to have a real wood. It just doesn't feel very real when I touch that. So I'll have to double check that. It's got some aluminum trim in here, so it's definitely a much more classy look. I just prefer the extra color the Toyota gives you, especially on that adventure grade model. Now the seats, these are the Nappa leather seats, which are also heated and cooled, which is nice. You have a two-person memory seat function on the driver's side, which you can get that on the Toyota if you guys go for the limited model. And this is supposed to be a brown leather, which hardly looks brown, so just keep that in mind if you guys want colors. The signature grade only comes with this actual color. Now, here's the current Mazda key fob. It's not that new key that I've shown you on the Mazda 3. When you put your foot on the brake, the engine starts right up for you. You wouldn't even know it's a turbo engine when you first start the vehicle up. Now, the one sour point of the Mazda's cabin is that infotainment system. Now, as you can see here, it's got a 360 camera system, but the resolution is so crunchy that makes the Toyotas look way more appealing versus what Mazda gives you. It's also a smaller screen. This is just an 8-inch touchscreen display. The touchscreen only works if you actually have the vehicle in park. If you have it in drive, you have to use the command controller knob over here. The nav screen itself just looks really childish. It looks really dated. Mazda has a new system in the new 3. This does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so at least it has that over the Toyota. The rest of the interior, you can see the steering wheel tilts and telescopes. You have a nice LCD display in the center stack. And then over here, you have a big center console with some storage as well. You have a traditional shifter for the 6-speed automatic, which does give you a sport mode as well, but it's a little bit more simple versus what you get in the RAV. You have dual zone climate control here, and you have heated and cooled seats, which is also nice. And then above me, Mazda only does just a standard size sunroof, a pano sunroof, which is available on the RAV, isn't even available on the Mazda. But overall, the RAV4's interior feels a little bit more roomy. In terms of more luxury, the Mazda feels more luxurious, but at the same time, the Toyota's is not farther behind, and I greatly prefer the infotainment system of the RAV4. Now, first getting into the back seat of the Mazda actually says the legroom back here is 39 inches, which I'm a little skeptical at that amount because it's on the smaller side when you look at the rear seat space. Now, I'm 5'7". I think the room is actually not bad for myself. There is a slight hump here that intrudes onto the middle passenger. You have rear seat air vents back here, but no actual climate control settings. Instead, if you fold down this armrest here, Mazda gives you 3-level heated seats, which is nice, and then you get 2 USB ports, which are in the cup holders. Now, thankfully, the materials are also soft touch back here, and you also have 2 map pockets here for storage. Now, overall, it's not a bad place to spend time, but just know that other competitors in this segment have more room. But let me hop into the RAV4 and see how the back space compares. So in contrast to the Mazda, the Toyota's back seat just feels a lot more open and airy when you get back here. The seat also has the ability to recline forward and back, which is nice. You cannot slide the seat forward, however, which some competitors give you that option. Toyota says the legroom back here is around 37.5 inches, which is actually less than the Mazda, but it feels a little bit more spacious to me. The floor is a little bit more flat here. You have 2 USB ports down here, and then you have your own set of rear seat vents, just 1 mat pocket, and then Toyota also gives you soft touch materials just like the Mazda. So in terms of the materials quality, the 2 cars are very similar, but just know that the RAV4 gives you slightly more space in the backseat in the real world, even though the numbers aren't quite the same. The armrest here also folds down, and you have 2 cup holders just like the Mazda. Now, under the hood of these 2 crossovers, they couldn't be more different. Let me first start with the Toyota, which is at a significant disadvantage compared to the Mazda, which has a new engine option for 2019. But most RAV4s are going to get this motor. This is the 2.5-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder with their D4S direct injection. It's got a very efficient compression ratio, or high compression ratio, and it has significantly more power than last year's RAV4 at 203 horsepower and 184 foot-pounds of torque. That's a 27 horsepower boost over the previous generation, and it also makes it more powerful than the base 2.5-liter motor that you find in the Mazda. Toyota also ships this out with an 8-speed automatic transmission with either front or all-wheel drive as standard, and because of that new 8-speed, because of that naturally aspirated engine, this gets up to 25 in the city and 33 on the highway. With all-wheel drive, it'll tow a maximum of 3,500 pounds. So that's one of the highest tow ratings in the segment, about 1,500 pounds higher than the Mazda. As this one sits, it weighs around 3,600 pounds. Now, in relation to the Toyota, Mazda offers the CX-5 with a turbo option for 2019. And that was to address the criticism of the lackluster 2.5-liter base motor. A diesel is also still coming. It should be out later this year in July, but that's for a different review. This is the 2.5-liter turbocharged Skyactiv G 4-cylinder with direct injection. With premium fuel, it makes up to 250 horsepower and 310 foot-pounds of torque. If you guys put regular in it, it makes 227 horsepower. So really, if you put regular in, it only has like 25 more horsepower than the Toyota, which is an interesting proposition, but way more torque. Now, this is standard with Mazda's iActive Sense all-wheel drive system, and it only goes out through a 6-speed automatic transmission, so 2 less gears than the Toyota. Because of that, it does have less fuel economy, or worse fuel economy, 22 in the city and 27 on the highway with this car. Premium, of course, is recommended. Now, the Mazda is also heavier. As this one sits, it weighs around 3,800 pounds, so it's a good 200 pounds heavier than the Toyota, and it'll only tow a maximum of 2,000 pounds. So you guys are probably wondering, how do the two cars drive compared to each other? Let's get them both out on the road and see how they perform. So first, getting behind the wheel of the new RAV4, the first thing you're going to notice immediately is just how much Toyota has improved the feel of this car. The chassis just feels so much more sporty. It feels so much firmer. It feels sharper. The steering is markedly improved. The engine, while it does have 27, almost 30 more horsepower than the previous generation, it does have adequate power for most situations. Toyota didn't have a 0 to 60 time, but I've seen it around the 8.89 second range, which is honestly sluggish compared to the competition. The engine itself is a little buzzy as well for my taste. I don't like the buzz that you get from the steering wheel through the pedals. It's not the typical Toyota way. I imagine if they added a little more in terms of sound deadening or something like that, you would notice that it's a little bit more of a refined engine. When you start to push the engine, you really feel the buzzy characteristics of it. Now, the 8-speed automatic in this car also, when you have it in its sport setting, seems perfectly fine, but when you don't have it in sport, when you have it in like normal setting, it is a little bit lazy to get out of its top gear. It's doing that to try to get the best gas mileage. This does get 25 in the city, 33 on the highway, very good gas mileage. No paddles on the wheel. I was expecting the adventure grade model to have the paddles, but I mean, overall, the RAV4 is no longer just, the Camry of crossover. It's still a very relatively refined car, but it will have a little bit of fun when you start to push it. Now, I also appreciate the higher up seating position. This car has, an inch and a half more or more ground clearance than the previous generation, and about an inch more than the Mazda. And it's nice to sit up high. The seats are also pretty comfortable. You have good visibility from the front, big side mirrors. The Toyota Safety Sense P 2.0 is standard, although Mazda also has their safety stuff standard as well. So, it's kind of a push with there. Really, if you want a little bit more power in the RAV, Toyota says you need to go for the hybrid model, which I did drive the hybrid last year when I was at the media launch. It's a good powertrain, but it still has that CVT that sucks the life out of the car. This 8-speed auto is more, pleasant from an enthusiast perspective, but you have to remember, people who buy this kind of a car, they don't really care. The noise levels in here from the buzzy engine, which can get only noticeable at high revs, there is a little bit more road noise in this car than I would like. Typically, Toyota is more refined in that regard. That lane departure alert you heard, the beep, is kind of annoying. It's something that can be turned off, but I wish Toyota would just vibrate the wheel. That's something that Mazda does instead. If you cross the lane, it just lets everybody know that you're a terrible driver per se. Now, on this road here, on this back road, I am noticing the ride can be a little firm at times. Now, I don't think the ride is too firm for my taste, but those of you who are used to the previous generation RAV4 and how soft that car was, you might notice this new one is definitely a little bit firmer, which is fine. Remember, this is on the new, TNGA platform, so it's a much stiffer chassis. It's a much sportier car, and you definitely notice that. But I'm just not entirely sure that Toyota has really moved the meter on the RAV4's driving dynamics. They've caught up to the competition for sure. This drives just as good as anything else. It could use more power. It could be a little bit quieter, but it's just not quite really memorable. It's a little bit on the bland side, if I'm being honest, in terms of the driving dynamics. But that's kind of okay. That's what most people want in this segment. But from an enthusiast perspective, you're going to want something that's a little bit more fun. So let's hop into the Mazda and see how it compares to this vehicle. So after just hopping out of the RAV4 and into the CX-5, you kind of immediately notice just how much smaller the interior feels. You feel like you're kind of sitting in a car that was designed to be sportier. It just doesn't feel quite as open and airy, which I'm okay with, because the car itself has a much more focused driver feel, and you notice that the instant you get behind the wheel of the CX-5. And this thing will seriously torque steer a little bit. Even though it's all-wheel drive, it has so much more torque and power versus the RAV4. It's ridiculous just how much more power this car has. And you put it into its sports setting here, and you find your favorite back road, your favorite twisty road, and so much torque and power. This thing is a freaking ride. It's hilarious, and that's what makes the CX-5 so unique, is the fact that it doesn't feel like your typical mainstream car like the RAV4 does. And the RAV4 drives fine. It's just when you start pushing the CX-5, there's a little bit of understeer there. This is such a fun car to drive. It feels like, you know, a hatchback at times. Now, I don't particularly think that people really care in this segment how it handles these curves, but as an enthusiast, I cannot ignore the fact that the Mazda speaks to me a little bit more versus the Toyota. It just, a little bit of push there. It's just so hilarious. And even though I'm on these, you know, big steep hills, this thing just keeps pulling and pulling. I mean, 0 to 60 time for this car is under 5 seconds. It's like 6.5 seconds. It is one of the quickest in the segment. You have to really go to a luxury brand to get the kind of driving feel with this car. Now, if you're not going to be pushing the Mazda as much, it's actually a quieter car on the inside than the Toyota as well. There's less road noise, less wind noise. It's got less engine noise as well from the interior and whatnot. Mazda just seems to have added more sound deadening materials to this car, which is a little bit surprising. Now, when it comes to the overall visibility and the Mazda, it's not quite as good as what you get in the RAV4. There's a bigger pillar over here that eats into your space. You do have very large side mirrors in here, so you can see out of this car very well. But overall, you do notice that it doesn't feel quite as open and airy. I wish Mazda would consider adding a panoramic sunroof on this car. It does have their full suite of active driver assistance stuff. So you've got the Mazda City Smart City brake support. It's got automatic braking. It's got lane departure alert. But unlike the Toyota, where it will beep at you if you go over the lane, the Mazda just gives you a nice subtle vibration through the steering wheel, which is much more, which is much nicer versus the annoying beep that the Toyota gives you. But seriously, this is such a joyous car to drive when you put your foot down. I think that's the reason why I'm so liking the Mazda CX-5. I mean, if this was the base 2.5 liter engine that, you know, competes with the base engine in the RAV4, I might end up picking the RAV4 just because the power of this 2.5 turbo really makes up for, you know, the lack of power that's in the base motor. But Mazda really did it right when they stuffed this turbo in under the hood. It really makes me hope that other brands will follow suit. I mean, the CR-V is probably the other one that offers the same quickness, but if you prefer a regular automatic versus a CVT in the Honda, this is the one you're gonna wanna go with, obviously. So late last year when I drove the all-new RAV4, I proclaimed it to be one of the best new entries in the compact SUV segment. Now, of course, I said all that before I had a chance to drive all of the competition, and there's a lot of new entries in this segment. So after spending time with both the new CX-5 and the new RAV4, I want to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of each of the vehicles. Starting with the RAV4, this is definitely the most attractive looking and most aggressive looking RAV4 that Toyota has ever produced. It has a much more sporty driving dynamic. It has a really nice interior that is honestly better than the Mazda in terms of everyday livability. You have a better infotainment system. You have basically just as nice materials, similar features, but more cargo space, more trunk space, and this thing also rides and handles very nicely. Now, really the downside with the RAV4 has to do with the powertrain. Despite the fact that the 2.5 liter engine has more horsepower this year, it just can't compete with Mazda's turbocharged engine. And I would really like to see Toyota offer a turbo or a V6 in the RAV. I mean, sure, they've got the hybrid model, but I would really like to see them do like an enthusiast choice. The Lexus NX's 2-liter turbo would be a great fit in this vehicle, but in terms of overall practicality, the RAV4 is the easier vehicle to live with, and it's the one that you're going to want if you guys actually have a family. You need to put stuff in the trunk and in the back seat. Now, coming back over to the Mazda here, even though this vehicle has a smaller back seat, a smaller trunk area, personally, if I was going to pick one of these, if it was my money, I would go with the Mazda CX-5 still, because I like the way this car drives. Its 2.5 liter turbo is essentially a replacement for the turbo engine that used to be available in the Subaru. It's got a responsive 6-speed auto, although it is down 2 gears versus the Toyota. It is a little bit more of a responsive transmission, although I wish Mazda had a better infotainment system, which they've got in the 3, and the availability of a panoramic sunroof. The fact that this is the enthusiast choice, it feels like I'm driving kind of like a hot hatch with all the power for a 0 to 60 time of under 7 seconds. It really makes this thing fun to drive. It makes me look forward to driving this thing because it feels like a sports sedan whenever I want it to, versus the RAV, which still kind of feels like an appliance compared to the Mazda. Now, coming over to the pricing of this vehicle, what's it going to cost to put one of these in your driveway? Now, this is an area where it actually kind of surprised me because I was expecting the Mazda to be more expensive, but it's not. This one, the fully loaded signature trim with the $600 Soul Red Crystal paint, stickers for around $39,400 in relation to the RAV, which stickers for around $40,263. Now, this is literally probably the most expensive adventure grade you could get. You have to pay extra for the painted roof. It's got some accessories like the roof racks and whatnot, and it's got, you know, the Toyota N2 navigation system and the technology package. So it's all adding up to the options that make this over $40,000. Now, you can get a RAV4 that is less expensive, but if you guys are going to look for a hybrid model RAV, going to be prepared to pay around, you know, $42,000 for a loaded model, whereas Mazda has really packed a lot of value into this car where it makes it feel like it's a luxury car from time to time, and it also is still very fun to drive. But I hope you guys have enjoyed my comparison between the 2019 Mazda CX-5 Signature and the 2019 Toyota RAV4 Adventure. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.